So back when I was a young man, I played a lot of basketball, and I was a pretty good shooter. I thought I was a pretty good shooter, so that was kind of my thing. But I remember one time being in PE. I think this was in junior high school, and talking to the PE coach, and he talked to me about a principle he called imaging. And as a junior high school student, I was pretty skeptical of everything, and I said, yeah, whatever. And basically, what his contention was um, that you could practice shooting free throws just by imagining making free throws, and it was a good way to improve your free throw shooting skill. And I thought that was just sounded wacko. So, and I was the kind of kid that would challenge you if you said something that was kind of wacko. I'm kind of still that way. I'll challenge you if I think you're coming up with something that doesn't make sense. And so what he did was pretty interesting. He took three groups of us kids. He split us into three groups, and he kind of went through and kind of tracked how good we were at shooting free throws and kind of created a baseline for all of us. And then he took the three groups and he split one group into what he called the practice group. And all week long for an hour during PE, the group that he called the practice group was going to practice their free throws. So for an hour a day, the practice group would practice their free throws. The second group he called the imaging group, and I was in that group. And he had us sit in the bleachers and close our eyes and imagine we were making free throws. Not necessarily shooting the free throws themselves, but imagine we were practicing shooting free throws and making them. And then the third group, he just had to do nothing. They didn't practice or image or anything. And after a week, he brought us all back, and he took the baseline that we had all started with, and he measured how good we were now. And it was interesting because the group that had done no practice obviously was the same. They were still the same free throw shooters. The group that had practiced all week had a pretty good improvement. I want to say like a 25% improvement in made free throws. Now the group that I was in, the group that was sitting in the bleachers, just sitting there imagining we were making the free throws, we actually had like a 20% improvement. And it was interesting because I personally had almost a 30% improvement just from sitting there and thinking about making free throws. Now, as you can imagine, this was pretty impressive to me as a junior high school kid, right? I was sold. I was a skeptic. I was proven wrong by my own skills, and I was sold. So I really started. I can't say I was really good at doing this in a lot of areas, but in the areas specifically of sports that I really wanted to improve on certain specific tasks, I would do this. I would image. I would sit there, and I can remember a lot of times laying in bed imagining hitting fastballs or making defensive plays at shortstop in baseball, or any sport I had, making the perfect throw as quarterback. And so I would lay there, and it was a way for me to kind of think about things that it put me to sleep, right? It was kind of boring, but as I imagined these successes over and over, I started to see more and more of them actually happen in my real life. And so, like I said, I haven't been perfect at it, and a lot of things I didn't do. But I can remember when our family was in real trouble and we were really struggling, and there was a lot of stress, and we really weren't managing it very well. There came a point where there was kind of a tipping point for me where I said, you know what, I'm not going to give up on this, and I'm going to figure this out. And at about that time, I started to think about, how in a lot of cases in our lives, we want change, but we don't really know what we want on the back end of that change. We want things to be differently, but we haven't really thought through exactly what we want. So at that moment, I took the time to say, you know what do I really want for my family? What kind of family do I want to create? Obviously, we were struggling. There was way too much stress. My wife and I weren't getting along. My typical kids and I weren't getting along, and definitely my kids on the spectrum and I weren't getting along. And so that was one of the things I wanted to do, is get along with them and have a lot of happiness and have a lot of joy in our family and a lot of laughter. And, I didn't obviously have expectations that we would never have problems, because that's just not the way life works. And I knew that from a very young age. But so I sat down at one point and I just started imagining what I wanted my family to look like. I, how I would want my kids to interact with each other and with me, kind of what relationship I had with my wife and with my kids. And I started kind of building all this out in my brain. I even took the time, and I hadn't done this a lot in my life, but I took the time to write down the kinds of things that were most important to me and that I thought would be the most important and impactful for my family. And this was probably 15 years ago, right? I mean, a long time ago. And I've still got the paperwork. I'm a big fan of keeping paperwork. I have books and books of things I've written down. Most of my stuff is online now, or actually in on computers. But I have an entire 3-ring binders of things I've written down that I've kept forever. And I'm sure I could find it if I tried to. But I wrote down everything that I wanted, the kind of family I wanted to see, the kind of relationships I wanted to have with my kids and my wife, and the kind of laughter and joy I wanted to see in my home. And, I spent some time every night for, I want to say, a couple of weeks just imagining what that would look like and imagining that life. And, I got busy doing other things and I forgot about it. And so it was pretty well impressed on my brain. I knew what I wanted. Let me just put it that way. And I had imaged it and envisioned it and really seen it and seen our future. And like I said, I forgot about it until I want to say last summer, maybe towards the end of last year, 2019. I took all my kids over to the park, and there was a basketball hoop over there. And I went over there with flip-flops on. My plan was just to sit down and read. And the kids are all playing at the park and having a great time. And I look up, and there's a couple of guys on the basketball court, and they weren't very good, and they weren't real competitive. And I had played some pretty competitive basketball, so I was just kind of grinning at their, attempts to have some fun. And at one point, one of them called out to me and said, "Hey, we need a sixth player." They had 2-on-3, and they wanted to have 3-on-3, just a half-court basketball. So they said, "Would you want to play?" And I I haven't played basketball in 3 or 4 years. I kind of retired a few years ago, so my body's not in the right kind of shape. But it looked like fun. It looked like they were just having fun. It wasn't too competitive. So I hopped up and started playing with them and really started having a lot of fun. Like I said, I had flip-flops on. It wasn't overly competitive. It was just a lot of fun, a bunch of guys having fun together. And so I participated in that. And, towards the end of it, I felt a twinge in one of my knees. And I've got some pretty rough knees over the years from playing a lot of sports. And so I kind of had to stop, and I went and sat down and finished reading my book. Well, that night, my knee really got swollen. I must have tweaked it a little bit more than I thought. And it really started giving me trouble. So I was icing it, and compressing it, doing all the things that I'd learned over the years to do. And the next day I woke up and it was just really stiff. And I'm not the kind of guy that likes to sit around. I'm kind of a busybody. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just immobilize it. I've got a knee brace I can lock onto it that I can just lock it down where it doesn't move. And I was getting around, just kind of hobbling around on this bad knee, and I was just going to wait it out and let it kind of get to feeling better and get more flexibility in it. And as I was doing that, I noticed I was kind of walking weird. And what ended up happening is I ended up hurting my back because I was dragging my bad knee around. And so now I'm really in a predicament, right? And again, this is tough on me. I don't like to sit still. I'm a real busybody. So at that point, my wife saw me cringe in pain, and she knew that there needed to be a shutdown for me. And so she said, "You know what, Kyle, I need you to you need to sit on your big happy chair there, and I'll get you some ice packs, and you stay there for a couple of days. I just don't want you doing much." And so she kind of relegated me to my chair and said, "This is where you're going to stay. I'll bring you ice, and we'll make sure you're doing okay." And it was tough on me because I like to be busy. I felt like I was wasting time, right? Now I have a couple of books to read, so I had some things to do, but there was a lot of dead time for me, and that's unusual. But it was interesting because hurting my knee and then hurting my back forced me to sit down and be still and just kind of watch. And what I ended up watching, and this is over a weekend period of time, as my kids were coming and going, and there was a lot of laughter and joy and happiness, and my kids got along, and they were helpful with my wife in the kitchen, and and making dinner and cleaning up and all those things that I had envisioned 15 years ago that I wanted for my family. And it was kind of surprising to me. Initially, I thought, oh, wait a minute. And as I watched, I just kind of soaked it all up. And I really started to enjoy it, to watch how my kids talked to each other, how they engaged each other, how they played with each other. You know, the goofy things we did. We played a lot of cards and board games, and we have an online TV game that we play that's just really silly, and there was a lot of laughter and love in our home. And I think it took me stopping all the movement, you know, all the activity I've always had in my life. I've always stayed really busy to actually see that the imaging that I had done 15 years ago had been realized. We had the kind of family that I had imagined, that I had wanted. And so I started to kind of review, you know, how that imaging thing works. And I have a book, and I've put it on my shelf back here. And I don't know if this is going to be backwards, but this is an old book called, well, Imaging, right? And as you can see, it's by Norman Vincent Peale. And it was written, I want to say back in the 50s or 60s. It's one of my older books. And I'm a big fan of older books, you know, the Think and Grow Riches and the How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And all these books that were written way back when are just courses on really how to do things. And so, you know, the fact that in the book it kind of describes how when you take the time to create an image of what you really want, then your brain starts to get activated and starts to try to push you in that direction. And obviously, I didn't do a great job throughout this time of, you know, actively re-imaging on a consistent basis. But what I think I did do is I got very clear on exactly what I wanted for my family, what kind of future I wanted to see. And I think that ended up helping propel me to take activities and do actions and take activities that led us to that direction. So I want to challenge you today. Here's the challenge, right? Is to take a few minutes and seriously get out a piece of paper and write down what you'd like your family to look like in 10 years or 15 years or, you know, tomorrow. And be very clear, you know, what kind of relationship do you want to have with your wife? What kind of conversations do you want to have? You know, what kind of love do you want to share with each other? What kind of things do you want to do together? You know, how can you make each other's lives better? What kind of things can you do to make her life better? And then do it with your kids. What kind of relationship would you like to see with your kids? What kind of relationships would you like them to see or to realize with each other? And really get very clear. I think mine ended up being 3 or 4 pages of, you know, what my future family would look like. And I want to challenge you to do that. And I'm serious. Get a piece of paper out, write it down. If you're listening to this on your computer, pull out a text document or a Word document and just start writing things down. And maybe take a few minutes, or, you know, maybe do what I did is at night as I'm laying down to go to sleep. Sometimes it's tough for me to sleep. And I would sit there and I would imagine our future and what it would look like. And I would add color to it. You know, sometimes when you imagine things, they're in black and white. I would add color to it, and you know, I would think about what they were wearing and kind of the conversations and the laughter and the joy and the happiness, and my relationship with my wife. When she saw me, how would she react? And when I saw her, how would I react? And really built these things out. So I want you to take that challenge, is to imagine for a moment what you'd like your relationship with your wife and kids to be in the future, what you want your family to look like and feel like. And take some time to close your eyes and imagine that and feel it. And just like I know imagining shooting free throws, how it improved my free throw shooting, I can guarantee in my life, I know that imaging helped. Now, I'm gonna end there, but I want to share with you a quick side note, because this is funny. A couple of months ago, my daughter, Chloe, who's now 12 years old, joined her first basketball team. And she's kind of small, and she's a pretty good ball player, but you know, she's just learning like the rest of them. And she came to me one day and she said, "I'm not a very good shooter. How can I get better?" And so it was interesting. I told her about when I was in junior high school and I was imagining making free throws. And I said, if you'll do that when you lay down to go to sleep, or just when you have nothing to do and you think about it, you'll get better at shooting. And my daughter believes me in a lot of things. She's not the skeptic I was at her age. And as the season wore on, she became a better and better shooter. On many occasions, she led her team in scoring, even though she was the tiniest little girl on the court, and it was her first season. It was other kids' second, third season sometimes. She could have been the leading scorer. If she wasn't, she was very close. And as the season wore on, I would talk to her and she'd say, you know what, Dad, I lay down every night and I think about making free throws and I think about shooting and making shots. And it was really interesting, right? So from the mouth of babes, I guess, in my daughter's case. But I want to challenge you to do that. Take us up on this offer. It's free. It's easy. It's kind of fun to just imagine what your future can look like and build it out and make it real in your mind. And I think if you will, you'll kind of have the same kind of results I did, which is you'll start to actually create actions and activities that lead you in that direction. So I want to leave that with you today. Have a great day. Make your family your top priority. And I know if you will, you'll start having better results and the kind of results you want in your family. So have a great day. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.